All right, coming to you from 4,200 feet in the hills of Oregon, it is the voice of Chi-Town, the Reddest Beard in the high desert, your host of the MOA broadcast, Sam Wilson. All right, folks, welcome. We got a great show lined up today. Lots of good info, some tragic news, unfortunately, on a few fronts, but otherwise, lots of good stuff. Couple of bullet points. We got if you haven't heard about this yet, there was one of those sightseeing helicopters crashed in New York City. Horrible story. We're going to cover that. I try not to get into drama and gossip type stuff, but this Snow White story, if you're not familiar, they redid the movie Snow White, and it has just been controversy after controversy, and it's costing some big dollars. So we're going to kind of cover that without getting too gossipy about the whole thing. And we've got COVID vaccine cover-up. This is going to be interesting, folks. Again, we're not going to get into so-called conspiracy theories, and we don't tell people what to do or what to believe. But we're going to share some good information. I think you'll find it interesting. Okay, first, we find ourselves in Washington, D.C. through Reuters. President Donald Trump's White House intends to challenge a judge's ruling lifting the restrictions it imposed on the Associated Press over the news agency's reference to the Gulf of Mexico in its coverage. So, this has been an ongoing saga. We've covered it a couple of times on this show in the past episodes. If you're not familiar, the AP stands for Associated Press. That's a news organization. And long story short, they're duking it out with the White House and Trump and whoever else is involved in this. When Trump renamed the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America, for whatever reason, and I'm sure we can speculate on a lot of them, but that it's immaterial at this point, the AP has refused to refer to it as the Gulf of America. And so basically for that reason, the Trump administration, the White House, whoever, they barred the AP from certain press locations. Like they couldn't go to the Oval Office. They couldn't be on Air Force One until they basically decided to call it the Gulf of America. And they didn't like it. So they sued they sued. I can't remember if they filed an injunction or not. Either way, the first judge didn't go with them. So they appealed it. And now apparently this judge, let's see, U.S. District Judge Trevor McFadden has ordered the White House to allow AP journalists to attend events open to the press in the Oval Office and on Air Force One, as well as larger spaces in the White House, while its lawsuit moves forward. It says that the administration has continued denying access to AP journalists as it fights this decision. So I don't know, at this point, there hasn't been a lot of good coverage, or I just didn't find it, if they're allowed in there or not. But they're going to continue to duke this out, and I guess we got ourselves a battle of wills going here, and I guess we'll see what happens. McFadden, the judge, he found that Trump's White House retaliated against the AP over its editorial choices, which violated protections for free speech under the Constitution, according to the judge. He did put his order on hold until Sunday to give the White House time to appeal. The White House began limiting it. Yeah, we covered that. They wouldn't, blah, blah. So I don't know. I guess they're going to keep doing this until somebody, this is probably going to wind up going to the Supreme Court too, like a lot of these lawsuits and injunctions and other things have been going on. So going to be interesting to see whatever side you support. It's going to be, they're not going to go down without swinging here. The White House plans to appeal, of course. So, okay, now we go to New York City, and we've got a doozy of a story when it comes to New York City. But we probably won't have time to get to it today. We'll see at the end of the hour. If we have enough time, we'll slip it in there. But man, if you have ever lost faith in humanity in New York, you've got a very good reason to. Holy smokes, unreal. But that's for later. The New York City helicopter that crashed into the Hudson River had a mechanical issue months before it broke apart midair and killed all 6 on board, including a family of tourists visiting from Spain, according to records. So I've got a conglomeration of several articles to get it going. There was one of those tourist helicopters that flies around the harbor, the river, across the Hudson. They go all over the place there and give you a helicopter tour of New York City. They're pretty cool. I did never take one. I'm not a huge fan of helicopters. This is one good reason. But anyways, uh, it crashed. The rotor broke right off, like mid-flight. It was insane. There were several articles that tried to make it sound like it ran out of gas, but out of fuel. But that was just because apparently, according to what I've read, the pilot had radioed in that he was going to have to fill up after this tour was done or something like that. But the gasoline or the fuel, excuse me, was not an issue apparently. Obviously, we know why it crashed. It broke apart. That was the most obvious reason. What caused it, obviously, is going to be another matter for discussion. It was a Bell 206L4 Long Ranger 4, long, not lone, Long Ranger 4 aircraft, owned and operated by New York Helicopter. This same helicopter had experienced a mechanical issue with its transmission assembly last September, according to FAA records. I don't know that that's going to be highly pertinent because they would have gone back up in the air if they hadn't fixed it, and that's going back several months. So, but who knows? I'm not a helicopter mechanic. Records show the doomed chopper was built in 2004 and had already logged 12,728 hours of flight time when it was forced into repair. Presumably, this is for the transmission issue that they just spoke about. Chilling footage captured the aircraft crumbling midair before it plunged into the river, with at least one rotor still spinning as other parts of the helicopter splashed down in various directions. If you haven't seen the footage, it's horrible because everybody died, unfortunately, but we'll get to that in a minute. The helicopter just breaks up. It's hard to tell exactly what comes apart, but the rotor goes flying. It was like something out of an action movie. It just goes flying in one direction, and predictably, the rest of the chopper just nosedives right into the river. I think it was the Hudson. Horrible. The video was insane. The family, who hailed from Barcelona, Spain, were flown by pilot Sean Johnson, 36, a Navy SEAL veteran who recently moved to the Big Apple for his still young aviation career. The helicopter crashed about 25 minutes into its air tour, the investigator said. Does it get to... I don't have that information here. I must have put it on a different paper. But unfortunately, the family that was visiting from Spain, the husband was some type of CEO or a big employee for Siemens over in, I believe, Spain. I think they're a German company. I could be wrong on that. I got a lot of information going through my head today. But it was him and his wife and their 3 young children. So the pilot himself was only 36. So he's still a young man, in my opinion. And then we lose this whole family. Absolutely horrible. Now, here is the unfortunate part, or the weird part, whatever you want to call it. This isn't the first time the tour company has seen one of its aircraft in the same murky waters. A Bell 206 chopper carrying 4 Swedish tourists crash-landed in the Hudson when the aircraft lost power in June 2013, with the pilot and 4 family members miraculously surviving. So, yeah, let's keep going. New York Helicopter CEO, that's the company that runs the flights, Michael Roth, told the Wall Street Journal at the time, this is back in the 2013 crash, that the chopper underwent daily routine inspections but had no clue why the aircraft malfunctioned mid-flight. Now, 12 years later, Roth, the CEO, has no clue again what happened. I'm absolutely devastated, Roth told the Post. The only thing I know by watching a video of the helicopter falling was that the main rotor blades weren't on the helicopter. Yeah, we noticed that bit. That's pretty obvious. I haven't seen anything like that in my 30 years being in business, he said. The only thing I could guess, I got no clue. So that's what he said. That was his statement both times. I got no clue. Now, something tells me that's not going to be good enough for the FAA. Now, in fairness, he may be for legal reasons saying what he's got to say or whatever, but yeah, that's an odd thing to say in your statement. I got no clue. I mean, I would want a lot more answers than that. And I would imagine this is going to have a negative impact on business. Then he says, this is horrific, but you got to remember something. These are machines and they break. So that part is pretty obvious, Mr. Roth. Man, what a shame. Again, if you haven't looked it up, you should check out the video. It's sad, of course, but it is unreal to see this chopper come apart like that. Again, it looks like something out of a movie. Now, we're gonna break away a little segue here, a little side quest, whatever you want to call it. we cover a lot of news stories, and we talk about, again, the principle here for is the MOA concept, make it out alive, right? Being aware of your surroundings, situational awareness, preparing for emergencies. I don't see what in the world this poor family and this pilot could have done to prepare for this. There was the helicopter was issued an airworthiness certificate in 2016 that was valid through 2029. Records show. Anyway, I don't know really if they could have done anything differently other than not being in the helicopter, so you can't really hold that against them. And we're not certainly not picking on anyone or trying to fault find in this story. But to the nature that, planes crash too. Any aircraft, you're going to have more devastating circumstances if it comes down unexpectedly, right, than just being in a car, most likely. But helicopters, man, if you've ever been in one, they are not the smoothest ride in a lot of cases. And there's just a lot of things that seem like they can go wrong. If you are of the age group that I am, let's just say not a young whippersnapper anymore, one of my favorite shows back in the 80s, and the TV shows in the 80s and even 90s, we had some really good stuff, man. Some of the, the technology and so forth, the stunts and everything may not have been quite as slick as it is now, but they had this gritty realism to it that is just extremely different than we see now. We'll get into that later. But if you recall, this made me think of the show Airwolf. Now, if you remember the show Airwolf, this was a hit television show. It only had a couple of seasons, I think, where they were doing really good. But you had Jan Michael Vincent as the lead character. He was along with his buddy that was played by Ernest Borgnine. Okay, and basically well, you know what? Let's just get into the story, and we'll unfold as we go along here. This is from a poster article by Ken Miyamoto, a producer and screenwriter and former Sony Pictures script reader, and he had a whole bunch of other things that he did too. I don't want to be disrespectful to the man, but there was a lot of stuff printed on that he did. This is the series Airwolf. It ran from 84 to 87, telling the story of a renegade pilot that was Stringfellow Hawk, played by Jan Michael Vincent, that goes on missions with an advanced battle helicopter as part of a deal with an intelligence agency to look for his missing brother. I believe his name was St. John or something like that. It was kind of a weird pronunciation of St. John, as I think as how it was printed or written, but it was called St. John. Now, interestingly enough, both of these helicopters, the one that crashed in New York and the Airwolf, were both made by Bell. Anyway, we'll get on to that later. The flight-capable Airwolf helicopter was a cosmetically modified Bell 222, serial number 47085, sometimes unofficially called a Bell 222A. During filming of the series, the helicopter was owned by Jetcopters, Inc. of Van Nuys, California. In the show, I'm just going to read some of this, so if you don't like Airwolf, you can speed along. Otherwise, I think this is pretty fascinating history about the show and the helicopter. In the show, the helicopter was a supersonic prototype. Helicopters not supersonic, at least not to my knowledge. They don't have anything like that, or hasn't been around recently or for a long time. The helicopter even had an evil twin. There was one episode, or maybe more, where it was like the alter ego of the Airwolf helicopter, and they kind of did battle, and it was a close call and all this stuff. But it was a very technologically advanced helicopter. It had all these different, buttons and gauges and rockets, and it was almost like the Batman in the 60s. Whatever Airwolf needed for that episode, you could push a button and it popped up. So anyway, that was kind of the nature of it. But here was the neat part. I didn't know this. It was an attack helicopter that could be disguised as a civilian aircraft, a quote-unquote wolf in sheep's clothing. That's why it was called Airwolf. I didn't know that. So if you haven't seen the show, you should. These are great shows, just like Hunter, Miami Vice. There's a bunch of shows from that time period that were really solid, and they were fun. They weren't trying to preach a political message. They were having a good time and getting lots of ratings doing it. But Airwolf, all the stuff kind of retracted. It looked, like it was a pretty wild-looking helicopter, advanced, but all the missiles, the guns, for the most part, they kind of retracted into it. It almost looked like a regular helicopter flying around. But then when he pushed the button, the missiles come out, the machine guns pop out, and all this stuff starts happening. Okay, so whatever happened to the Airwolf helicopter after the show ended? After the series concluded, the cosmetically modified Bell 222 was sold and became an ambulance helicopter in Germany. Who would have thought? However, on June 6, 1992, it crashed on the side of a mountain during a thunderstorm, killing all 3 crew members. Horrible tragedy. The helicopter had just saved a little girl suffering from heavy burns on a mercy mission from Berlin to the Cologne University Burns unit in Köln. After delivering her to safety, it was headed back to Berlin when it and the crew encountered unexpected weather. The visibility was reduced to nearly 100 feet due to fog amidst an oncoming thunderstorm. So what happened? Pilot error caused the helicopter and its crew to impact near a rock quarry close to Haubesweg at 100 miles per hour. The rotor blades clipped the tops of several trees and then crashed on the mountainside. A local farmer heard the explosion and notified emergency services. It took them over an hour to find the crash site. When it was found, the helicopter was broken in half and the engine was destroyed. A replica of Airwolf was created in the early 2000s, and from 2007 to 2015 was displayed in a Tennessee museum until it was sold to a collector. I have no idea if this replica could fly or do anything, or if it was just a shell or whatever. The replica is now on top of a $250 million mansion in Bel Air, California. So, interesting little story there. If you didn't know what happened to Airwolf, I had heard about the crash before, but I did not know about the sheep, wolf in sheep's clothing. Thought that was pretty cool. I also didn't know that it had died on, or it crashed on that medical mission. So what a shame. Fortunately, the little girl made it though, so we're very thankful for that. Okay, why is Snow White bombing? Now this, again, I don't want to get into a bunch of gossip or drama stuff, but this kind of dovetails with the point about these shows. In the 80s, I mean, one of my favorite shows, there were a bunch of them in that time, but I mean, I think the first things that come to mind, like Dukes of Hazzard, okay, Hunter. Hunter was probably in the top 5 for me, maybe top 3 of that time period. This was a show with Fred Dryer and Stephanie Kramer, and they were 2 LA cops, and they basically just did things their own way. They always, it was mostly legal, but they went out there and they got the job done. They didn't let the bureaucracy and the red tape stop them from getting their guy. And while I was having my lunch just the other day, I don't have a TV that I watch for TV anyway. So I watch, Amazon or whatever streaming services that I think it's Amazon Prime. And I was watching the episode, one of my favorite episodes. It was in season 1. It was called Fireman or Fireman or something along that lines. And if you're old enough, if you're an old codger, you may remember that episode and that show. It's this guy who's a Vietnam vet. He's got PTSD and he's having a hard time keeping it together. And he was in a flamethrower squad or whatever. I can't remember the whole thing, but he starts torching buildings in LA. He starts flipping out again. And the thing that made it unique to me though was when I watched it on the streaming service is it had originally, when it came out, it had that great song by the Talking Heads, Burning Down the House, which was a great, a pairing of a song and a scene. There were several just, fantastic shots of this guy just, waving this flamethrower around as he's torching buildings all over LA. And they were playing Burning Down the House while it was going on. It was great. But they changed it out to a different show or a different song. I can't remember Lighting a Candle for You or Holding a Candle for You, something. I hadn't heard of it. But it was a good song. It was just very different. So I did some research. Interestingly enough, I guess the people that own the rights, they got tired of paying or didn't want to pay the rights to keep Burning Down the House in there. So apparently there were a number of songs that got switched out throughout the years in that series and others. So anyway, interesting little side note. But the thing is that show probably, even aside from like just the fun side of it, it was pretty well acted, very well acted, I would say. For, Fred Dryer wasn't a dyed-in-the-wool actor. He was a former football star. And he got, I think he was originally he was going out for the Cheers gig, and he didn't get it because Sam Malone, the character Sam Malone, played by Ted Danson was just an absolutely perfect fit for that character. And so they wound up giving it to him, but as if you want to call it that, a consolation prize, they gave Fred Dryer the series Hunter, which wound up doing very, very well for him. Maybe not as well as Cheers, but Ted Danson was the right choice in that one. He was a perfect fit for that character. And in my opinion, Fred Dryer was absolutely perfect for Rick Hunter, which I believe was his name in that show. Anyway, there's this difference in these shows now. You watch the chemistry between Dryer and Kramer, Hunter and McCall. They never made McCall out to be this wussy little girl, this weak. She was always very tough. But they never put her in fact, I think her nickname in the first season or 2 was the Brass Cupcake or something like that. And I'm going somewhere with this. We're going to talk briefly about political correctness, okay? I'm not going to get political. We don't do that here, and we don't tell you what to believe. We just give you the information, the news. But the political correctness thing is just out of control. It's a means of control is really all it is. Someone doesn't like what you say or do, and so, okay, you can't say this word now. You can't say this word now. You have to say this or believe that, or you're offensive and yada, yada, yada. But the point I'm getting ready to make, and we're going to compound it with the Snow White story, is McCall was called the brass cupcake, and she was always tough and everything else, and she could hold her own, but never once did they try and make it seem like, okay, she's going to beat up the main guy, or she's going to do something the main guy can't. Fred Dry was like 6'6". He was a big guy, man. He was a football player, NFL football player. And anytime she got in trouble, he's the one that came kicking the door down or busting in through the window or whatever else. It was reasonable and sane. I have been in physical altercations where men and women are both fighting each other. Anybody that thinks it's real is they're insane. I can tell you from personal experience. I've seen a woman on more than one occasion just get a backhand slap across her face that a guy probably would have just shrugged off, and it sent her flying. Okay, now we're not going to get into a bunch of violence and other things. That's not what this show is about. And we're not trying to put women down. We're just simply saying that men and women are different. And this show was a great example of great chemistry. There was a tremendous amount of respect too between Hunter and McCall. And I think that's one of the reasons why it did so well. And they had such a good rapport both on the show, and I don't know about off. I would imagine probably so, because their chemistry was good. But they had a lot of respect for each other, and they knew, okay, when things were getting too tough for McCall, that's when she called Hunter in, and that's what he did. He was the wrecking ball. So anyway, we move on to Snow White. Part of the problem, the Wall Street Journal film critic Kyle Smith calls the Snow White remake charmless, uninspired, and mediocre. Ouch. So apparently the show is having some political correctness issues. It's trying to be too quote unquote woke. If you don't know what that is, that's a whole other episode. But they're trying to shoehorn in a bunch of politically correct stereotypes and other things. Let's see. To go through this brief, let's get some of the facts here. The movie is bombing. It's doing very, very badly. It has officially beat Dumbo for the lowest debut weekend, sitting at $43 million. According to this article, Disney has lost $500 million, with the movie itself costing $270 million in promotions adding an additional $230. So that puts it around 600 something million right there. You got to understand though, when a movie goes through at the box office, that I'm not an expert on this, but I've read this up a number of times over the years, a lot of research. Typically the theaters, there's kind of a sliding scale, but the theaters usually get between 40 and 50% or so of ticket sales. Okay, so if a movie costs, let's say 100 million, let's just be very rough with the numbers. By the time it plays out in theaters, if it takes in $100 million, it didn't come close to breaking even. It made basically $50 million. Okay, so you got to make basically 2 to 3 times what the movie cost to get to zero and start making money. Okay, so this movie is in serious trouble. It hasn't even hit 100 million yet, according to this, and it cost it's 169 million according to this one here, and it's got another 400 million to go, depending on what numbers you believe. Now the interesting thing is, get a load of this. The original Snow White, and I looked this up in several sources, they all said the same thing. The original Snow White in its theatrical run in 1937 made between 184 and 187 million dollars in 1937. That is crazy. Now, what gets even more crazy is if you adjust that for inflation, which I did, $184 million in 1937. I went to several different inflation calculators. So if there's an error, they all said basically the same thing. $184 million in 1937 equals $4 billion. That's billion with a B in 2025. It was actually $4,086,320,555.56. That original Snow White was a monster. And what did Disney do instead of playing it back? They went in there and they tinkered with all of the things that made it a success. So I don't have time to go. We're going to run out of time no matter what here, but we'll try and get through this. Snow White is apparently focused more on empowerment and leading the villagers against the evil queen or whatever. I haven't seen any clips. I just read an amalgam of descriptions and reviews. The main star that played Snow White, she stepped in a big time, man. She went on the news. I don't know why people bring their politics into stuff, but she made all kinds of negative remarks about Trump supporters and just other political comments. There ain't going to be no prince this time type of stuff. There wasn't a prince. Apparently there was some type of bandit or somebody else. I don't know, depending on what you read here. And she just came across as really, really unlikable, which was a bad idea. Because at one point I even saw a video of her. She goes, if you don't like it, I don't need your business. Kind of sounds like you do. I don't think I probably would have said that. You don't really win people's hearts and minds and their pocketbooks over by insulting and belittling them. Just my 2 cents. And they were more focused on apparently changing the story. And here's the other thing that I got. Now, I don't know. We're not even going to get into whether this is offensive or not. I don't care. There were in the original one, there were the 7 dwarves characters. Okay. I don't know if they still use the term dwarf or not, but that's what we're going with. In this live action one, apparently some celebrity spoke out about how that would be offensive to dwarves. I believe he was a dwarf himself. I don't know how that worked out, but he said it would be offensive, or whatever the problem was. He spoke out against having dwarves in the live action remake of this film. Why would you do that? Imagine you're a dwarf in Hollywood. Already, you're going to have a limited amount of roles that you can take, right? They're just, not every movie or TV show is going to call for a dwarf character. Excuse me, let me get a sip. So imagine you're a dwarf in Hollywood, whether you like the movie or not, or whether or not it was a big success. Look at the massive amount of exposure that you could get for at least 7 dwarf actors in this film. A Disney production, there are going to be few movies on the planet that get the exposure that you're going to get in a Disney production. What a great way to market yourself for future jobs. And they cut them out and they used CGI characters and they called them, I don't know, I read several different versions of this online. It was magical beings or spirit people or I don't know, whatever it was. Some absolutely ridiculous nonsense. And just so they took all of the elements that made, and there was a bunch of other things they changed too. They took all these elements that made the original a massive $4 billion success. And they destroyed it all. And the movie is tanking bad. So, that's what happens when you try and take, I don't care if you use the term DEI or politically correct or whatever in the world it is. When you try and take things that people don't naturally agree with or go along with and cram it down their throats, you're going to have bad success. And okay, you know what? We got that. We'll save that segment. We're almost on time in this episode. Stay with me, folks. We're going to go ahead and take the break. When we get back, we're going to discuss what happens with real, strong women characters and movies and why these are great for everyone. And we've got some more, the COVID vaccines. You're going to love this. All right, when we get back from the break. More Make It Out Alive with Sam Wilson after this.
Hope Street Farm Stand is a self-serve farm stand located at 3803 Hope Street. Coffee shop, sourdough bakery, gourmet mushroom farm, and apiary. Offering sourdough breads, gourmet mushrooms and mushroom products, honey, and more. Open Thursday through Monday from dawn to dusk. Current offerings on Hope Street Farm Stand's Facebook page. Online at hopestreetfarmstand.com. Hope Street Farm Stand, a proud supporter of community radio.
Klamath Community Radio is supported by Howard's Meat Center, now offering Smokin' H barbecue, slow smoked ribs, chicken, tri-tip, and more. Located on South 6th Street next to Les Schwab. Online at howardsmeatcenter.com. Phone number 541-884-8430. Howard's Meat Center and Smokin' H barbecue, where quality meets tradition.
Want to get your business noticed? Sponsor a show on KKFO Gold Country Radio on 103.3 FM and create awareness through on-air announcements, our online stream at goldcountryradio.org, and our podcasts that live on forever. Your message reaches a broad local audience while also targeting listeners who choose to tune in to the shows they love. Plus, we promote your sponsorship across our website and social media. For more information, email goldcountryradio@gmail.com. Call 541-238-6989 or visit goldcountryradio.org. Gold Country Radio, your message heard locally and beyond.
You're listening to the MOA broadcast with Sam Wilson. Will you make it out alive? And we are back from the break here with the Make It Out Alive broadcast. I am your host, Sam Wilson. And we have got more good information for you. Now, where we left off, before the break, we were talking about all this woke. And again, we're not going to get political, folks. That there are so many places. You can't go anywhere without getting somebody's politics. This is going to be more of an opinion piece, in my opinion. But we're not going to bring in Democrat this, Republican that, Trump, yada, yada, yada. We're just going to talk about, in my opinion, the reality of the situation. So we were talking about this Snow White thing. They were trying to make her more of a, I don't know if you call her a freedom fighter or not, but instead of just being Snow White, the damsel in distress, and the prince that comes to save, and you know, whatever. And I think it's been probably 30 or more years since I've even seen parts of the old Snow White. But they went to great lengths in a lot of these interviews to talk about how much different this Snow White was going to be. Now, remember, this was a formula that made Disney the equivalent of $4 billion in 1937. Anyway, the main star kind of went off the rails, in my opinion. She was not very likable. People, and they fled the theater. They don't want to see it. It's going to probably wind up costing them several $100 million in one fashion or another. They may make up a good chunk of that in DVDs or whatever, in the streams or whatever in the world the kids are doing these days. But they're trying to cram this stuff down people's throats. We use the example of, again, a fictional TV show, obviously, or a television program, Hunter, where, you know, you had Hunter, the male cop. He's this big 6'6" guy who's a former football player. And then you had his partner, who was McCall, who was a very petite lady. She did a great job, by the way. She really was a tough cookie in that show. You never, ever once thought this is some weak little lady that they just gave a gun and a badge to and told her to go. She did a great job. Really liked her performance all the way around. Anyway, so they got me thinking about, you know, people talk about the way things are now. Let's put it like this. Frequently, if you don't go along with this, what they call woke, or it used to be politically correct, now it's woke, this and that. There's always a new name for it. They're basically ways of controlling people's, you know, thinking and actions. If you don't say this and use this word instead, it's offensive, and now they're going to come after you and cancel you. I mean, imagine the insanity of you. If you truly want to help someone who's made a mistake, you don't try and cancel them and go after their livelihood, destroy their standing in society, lose them, you know, cost them their job. Do you think that's going to help someone change their point of view? No, that's not how you do it. That proves to you that the cancel culture stuff, it's not about helping people. It's about just giving people an opportunity to vent their venomous rage at people they don't like or agree with. It's insane. The acrimony is just, online's a nasty place anyway. But it got me thinking, there are two fantastic examples that I thought of, and I got to keep this brief because we got all kinds of good stuff ahead of us. But made me think of two examples that came to my mind immediately, and that was from two films from the 80s. Alien or Aliens, they were the Alien franchise, and then the Terminator, both 1 and 2. Here you had, in the Aliens franchise, you had the Ripley character played by Sigourney Weaver, and then in the Terminator franchise, you had the Sarah Connor character played by, I always forget her name, Linda Hamilton. Played by Linda Hamilton. Both of these gals did a fantastic job. I don't think anybody that I have ever spoken with saw those films. I've seen them on TV, so I didn't see the full versions. I remember watching them as a kid, but never saw those characters or those films and thought, wow, they were really trying to cram this lady down our throat. She was so, you know, fake and this and that. They propped her up. No, both of those characters were genuinely hardcore. They didn't really want to do it. They didn't want that mantle of being the hero or of being the savior, in my opinion. When I watched those films, they were both reluctant. They didn't want to do it. But when they realized it was up to them, hey, it's time. You got to put your spikes on and get in the game. They delivered. And it came from an authentic place, and that resonated heavily with the viewers of those films. Never once have I ever heard anyone remark anything to the remote notion that the Sigourney Weaver character of Ripley or the Sarah Connor character were, you know, quote unquote DEI hires or politically correct, even though that wasn't, you know, the thing that it is now. Back then, people were always impressed. They're like, wow, you know, great characters. They dug deep. Like in Alien, she has to protect that little girl. When she realizes that she is now responsible for this little kid's life, Ripley, you know, Sigourney Weaver's character, she puts it into overdrive, and the mama bear instincts, if you want to call it that, whatever you want to call it though, she realized it's time to go and she gets in there and squares off with this insanely large and powerful and deadly alien queen and goes to town, man. And the same thing in the other film, both of them. I forget which one came first. I think the girl, Newt was her name, was in the second film. Anyways, she was the same basic character. She didn't really want to do it, but when it became obvious it was now up to her to save lives, she did what she had to do. Same thing with Sarah Connor. She really didn't want anything to do with that. But whenever it was time, she embraced it fully and she did the job and she did it right. Now, what is the point? Clearly, I understand these are films, but that's what we're talking about. In the culture we live in today, if you don't celebrate even insane amounts of diversity or whatever, putting a woman in a man's job, and like we talked about in the first half, I've been in violent situations where I've seen women take physical blows that would have barely, scathed a man or affected a man, and it sent them flying. They were out unconscious, okay? We are not the same. Why would you want to be the same? We're different for a reason. Anyway, that's another story. But that is the point. We're in a point now where if you don't say, oh yeah, a woman can get in there and karate fight these, 4 other guys all at the same time, you're a misogynist. And it's like, that's not the case at all. That wasn't the point. Ripley didn't want to go in there and fist fight or MMA fight these aliens. She used tools that equalize things, okay? But it was really more her attitude. And that's where we're going. We got to get away from this idea of every time you disagree with somebody, trying to quote unquote cancel them and call them a misogynist or a racist or a whatever. Neither one of those women in those films, they were strong, tough, fierce women. But they weren't sold as, look at how tough this character is. She got put in a situation in basically both films where they had to do something and they rose to the occasion. In my opinion, that's part of what made the Die Hard, character, McClane with Bruce Willis. That had so much appeal because, not that he was trying to run away from it all, but that wasn't really what he was there for. But when the time came, he dug in. He was an everyman. And that's another thing. We don't have time. There's so much time, so much stuff to talk about. But have you seen action figure and action movies and their characters now, 30 years ago versus now? I saw a part of some action movie on Amazon the other day. It was a newer one. It looked interesting. I started watching it. These guys are like 30, 40 years old, and they look like they're teenagers. Nobody ever sweats. Nobody ever has teeth that aren't like Optilux 11 level white that are blinding. Their skin is always perfect. Their hair is always perfect. They've got the latest, trendiest outfits. And we saw action movies in the 70s, the 80s, the 90s. These guys got sweaty. You could tell they had bad breath. They were in a foul mood. They needed to change their clothes, and they didn't care. They kept on going. These films now, and this is not a political or a whatever, philosophical rant. It's just strange to me how perfect all of these characters are. You can even tell the sweat. It looks like it was just sprayed on right before every shot. It's interesting though how far we've departed from the way things were gritty and believable back then. And now these movies, I can't hardly, maybe it's just me, I'm a bit of an extremist, but I can't hardly watch it. It just looks so fake. Anyway, that's that. Let's move on. We're going to run out of time. We got all kinds of stuff left. We've got our email. We've only got time for one today. We're going to go to DR. That's the only name he gave us. So we'll respect his privacy. A listener, viewer. Hello. I've been enjoying the podcast as I'm an avid outdoorsman and hiker. I'm a little older now, so I don't get out as much as I would like, but I still enjoy hitting the trail. Excuse me. I have always been intrigued by hollow handle survival knives. For those of you that don't know, I design and make and produce both custom handmade and on a small production level hollow handle survival knives and other knives that you can find at gearconvoy.com with a whole bunch of other outdoor gear. Anyway, we'll get back to that. I have always been intrigued by hollow handle survival knives, and I already owned one of your Packlight ultralight hollow handle knives that I purchased before your podcast came out. Thank you. That is how I found you. My question is, what do you recommend as far as a kit in a hollow handle knife that is actually practical? Thanks in advance, and keep up the podcast. I'm enjoying them. DR. Well, thank you, DR. Much appreciated. I'll tell you what, for those of you that are watching the video version of this is what he's talking about. This is my Packlight. It stands for Pack and Camp Knife, PACK. It's an acronym, light, because it's so light. This knife, without anything in the hollow handle, is approximately 3.2 ounces, okay? So it's designed to be a thin slicing knife, but it will take, if you go to our website at gearconvoy.com, on the homepage, there's a video of me mercilessly. This knife has a 3-inch long blade that's 3/32 thick. All right, it's ground thin to slice. But to show people that hollow-handled knives are not junk, there is a video of me mercilessly beating this knife into a 2x4 with an axe handle, and it tears my hand up with the axe handle, and it chews the axe handle up into bits. While, of course, this like 3-minute video. Okay, I'll do another one in the future of one of my larger knives but it's called batoning if you're not into the bushcraft scene. But it takes an absolute insane amount of abuse. These are designed and made in the U.S. domestically with domestic materials, or at least they're sourced domestically. They may come from somewhere else. I don't know, but I buy them from American suppliers, the raw materials, that is. They're very, very well-designed knives. But to the point, they have a hollow handle. For those of you that aren't familiar, this butt cap I'm going to show on the camera here, it unscrews, and you have a glow-in-the-dark compass for some rudimentary navigation. I wouldn't recommend a button compass for much in the way of navigation, but it can be useful. Let's see here. Boom. So the kit comes out. You can see there's a hollow there. Do I have a pin? Yes, I do. You can see how far that fits in there. That gives you, what is that? That gives you almost 3 full inches of storage there. Now, there's been a lot of confusion. Before we get to the kits, there's been a lot of confusion over the years. What is the point of a hollow handle knife? The point is, it gives you a redundancy kit. This should not be your main survival kit when you're out in the backwoods or whenever you're in a plane or a chopper or whatever. This is a redundancy kit. Okay? So the hollow handle is waterproof. We test them for up to 30 minutes underwater in a 5-gallon bucket, and they come out perfectly dry every time. Beyond that, I don't want to make any guarantees, but I've left them overnight before and not had any leakage. Who knows what you may experience, but it's essentially, if it gets dunked or whatever else, you're completely waterproof for that amount of time. Okay, so you got a waterproof, crush-proof capsule in this handle, where in this case, I carry, and this one that I carry with me on a regular basis, it's got we call the Commando paint job on there. You may not be able to see it, but it's a airbrushed camo finish on there. Very popular. People love it. I mean, if you got a survival knife, why wouldn't you want a camo paint job, right? Okay. Now, what we had in the handle, it just spilled out. There are 3 strike anywhere matches. Sometimes you just need to start a fire or get a fire going right away for whatever reason. 3 strike anywhere matches. A small ferro rod. For those of you that don't know, a ferro rod is sometimes called a flint and steel or a metal match or a number of other things, but it's a small rod about 2 inches long or 1.5 inches long in this case, that if you strike it with the spine of the knife or anything sharp, it will throw a shower of sparks. And if you are experienced and have practiced, you can easily get a fire going with one of these. And the advantage is, unlike the 3 strike anywhere matches, you can get hundreds of strikes out of these, meaning easily dozens, if not more, hundreds of fires. So ferro rod, 2 of these mini glow sticks, which are extremely handy. I recommend they're great. You pop one open, you crack it. It's like the large glow stick. It'll glow pretty bright enough to read by or navigate by on a compass for several hours. 2 of those, so you got a little light source. What's called a quick tinder tab. For those of you that don't have the video of this, I'm showing all the items to the camera here. I'm dropping them because my fingers just aren't that great. The quick tinder tab, you can usually get at least 2 fires out. I cut them in half, and these will take a spark very readily, and they'll burn for about 1.5 to 3 minutes, depending on your atmospheric conditions and where you're at and what's going on. So one of those, and that also helps to keep the rattle down from everything inside the handle. And we have one of these mini nanolight flashlights that you can get. These are great. They're bright little lights. And, now you got a flashlight. Flashlight is one of the most important things, along with fire, in my opinion. If you're in an emergency that isn't going over a day or 2 or 3, you've got light, because if you don't have some light source, once the sun goes down, you're basically done until the morning, unless you have a really bright moon there. So anyway, all of that fits inside that handle, and that gives you a great little kit for a day hike, for whatever. And you can also build on that. We have kits that are this size that will go in pouches on sheaths that you can fit, larger flashlights in there. This is an Olight brand. All this stuff we carry on the website at gearconvoy.com. A scalpel blade, which is handy because That allows you to cut the cord. There's about 17 to 20 feet of cord on the handle of this knife. So anyway, that's all the time we're going to have for that. But I want to show you that's one of the kits. We also have a variety of kits that you can get pre-made that we sell at thegearconvoy.com if you want to go that route. Or you can just go look and see what we sell and make it yourself. I don't care. The main thing is you practice with it and know what you're going to do with it, how to use it, so that when the time comes, you're not helpless. Okay? And there's all kinds of different varieties where you have to depend what they call in your area of operations. You want to make sure that for where you're at, you have what's appropriate. Okay, fire is usually pretty high up there on the list for most people, but it may be that water is going to be more important for you than in the case of water purification tabs or something like that. But that is to answer the question. But again, to be clear, the hollow handle kit, some people are like, well, I don't want my survival kit in my knife because if I lose my knife, then I've lost everything. That kit in the handle should be your ultimate redundancy. That should not come out unless all else is lost. Okay, let's be clear. You should have 1 or 2 or 3 other good, larger kits that are ready to go before you get to the handle. The idea is if all you're left with somehow is your knife and sheath, you have what's in the handle, and that's going to be the last resort. It's better than nothing because if you have a knife that doesn't have a hollow handle, there's no kit in there. Okay. So anyway, do what works for you. The main thing is practice and be prepared. Let's see. Now, one other thing I wanted to address briefly, one of the questions that comes up in these bushcraft and outdoor discussions frequently is people will say, well, the best survival knife is the knife you have with you when you need it. Okay, that is in a way true, but we're talking about chicken or the egg. When people say, what is the best survival knife or what is a good survival knife for you? Survival knife doesn't always have to be this big, huge, quote-unquote Rambo knife. That knife is extremely small, but very, very functional. I use to clean fish. I go trout fishing here in Oregon all the time in the fishing season. It does great at cleaning fish, making a campfire, and doing all kinds of other things. So the quote-unquote the survival knife is the knife you have with you when you need it. The real question is, or the real point of that is, make sure you only have a knife that's going to be beneficial whenever you need it, when you're in those circumstances. So, chicken or the egg, however you want to put it, but the bottom line is don't let yourself get caught up in the nomenclature and the all these weird axioms and so forth. Plan ahead. That's what MOA is all about. You plan ahead before time and make sure you have the best tool for the job. Okay, we've got to get moving here. This one's a bit of a sad story. We go to Atlanta, Georgia. A hiker was killed and another had to be rescued after a tragic accident in the Cohutta Wilderness area early Saturday morning. At approximately 2:15 a.m., Fannin County Fire Department Search and Rescue, SAR, responded to a life-threatening emergency involving campers in a remote and difficult-to-access location. 4 men were sleeping on hammocks when a tree fell onto their campsite, according to officials. Now, to be clear, we address this in a minute, but the hammock had nothing to do with it. So it's not because they were in a hammock the tree fell, according to all of our research here. The same would have happened with the tent, unfortunately. One of the men was trapped beneath the tree and unresponsive. 2 were able to hike out on their own, but rescuers had to use a helicopter to rescue the injured hiker. They were approximately 4.2 miles from the nearest trailhead, so they had to do an 8.4-mile hike. That is the SAR team to get them out of that terrain. Rescuers are calling it a tragic and unforeseeable tragedy. Now, I did some research on some of the hiking groups online, and according to some of the people that claim to have knowledge, this is what happened. They were hammocking near the boulders at the top of this area. All 4 of the trees they were attached to were healthy and green. None of the trees their hammocks were attached to were dying or were the problem. They remained standing. What happened is there was a tree that fell 30 to 40 feet away. It says possibly a hemlock, and it also was healthy and green. But the entire root ball came loose. Apparently this area, if you've ever been in Georgia, a lot of the area there is clay, it's silty. It's not like the deep, dark, rich soil that you have like in the Midwest. So apparently on this area, the entire root ball came out and the tree just kind of popped out of the ground and fell over and landed on top of this poor guy's hammock and killed him. Horrible story. The falling tree hit one hammock directly and the second one indirectly. A father-daughter team nearby heard the fall and screamed for help, and they took the 2 uninjured hikers back to their car, and the 2 others were life flighted, and unfortunately, one did not make it. So very, very sad to hear that. Again, to be clear, it appears the tree that fell had nothing to do with hemming. So don't be worried about hammock camping. It was apparently 30 to 40 feet away, the tree that fell. And what do we learn from this? That's a tough one, man. There's nothing you can do about it sometimes. If you've spent much time in the woods, you've probably been either sleeping or awake when you hear a loud crack and then a boom, and then a tree just comes down, man. Sometimes it's a large branch or a portion of a tree that is suspended in branches up there, or the whole thing just comes, and there is nothing you can do to stop it. So, you got to check that the night before while you still have daylight. But I mean, how far out do you check? There was no indication, according to everything I've read, that this tree that was 30 to 40 feet away approximately, how are you going to know if it just uproots itself and comes down and falls over? It didn't break in half, a branch didn't fall. The whole thing just kind of popped out. It slid out sideways out of the ground is how it sounds, and came down and killed that poor fella. So really a shame. Hope everything is, thoughts and prayers with him and his family. Okay, we got to keep moving. We're going to run out of time. I'm going to read you the headlines, and then we're kind of skip through this. Folks, again, we don't get political, and we don't tell you what to think or believe in most cases, unless it's an opinion situation. In this particular piece, we're just going to give you the facts, and you draw your own conclusions. Headline. The New York Post, CDC doctor monitoring bad COVID vaccine reactions may have deleted files, alleges Senator Ron Johnson. So there was a doctor who's monitoring the negative responses people had to the COVID vaccines, and according to the senator, he may have deleted some of his files. He's been accused by a Republican senator of mishandling and possibly deleting key records. The man who is alleged to have done this, Dr. Tom, I'm probably going to pronounce this wrong, Shimabukuro, the director of the CDC's Immunization Safety Office, has been struggling to produce records while complying with a subpoena from Senator Ron Johnson for vaccine safety data. HHS officials recently informed me that his records remain lost and potentially removed from the email system altogether, Johnson wrote in a Wednesday letter to Attorney General Pam Bondi and FBI Director Kash Patel. It's not clear what records are missing, but his team told him that HHS was struggling to find the information that he had responsibility for and that should exist. Now get this. The Wisconsin senators' concerns about the adherence to record-keeping requirements come on the heels of revelations that the NIH, the National Institutes of Health, senior advisor Dr. David Morens retained very few emails or documents pertaining to the government's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. What did he allegedly do? In November 2023, the Senator Johnson discovered evidence that Morens had instructed colleagues in 2021 to contact him at his Gmail address, apparently not going through the internal email servers and service that they have. Excuse me. Now, what happened next? The Dr. David Morens later indicated that he couldn't remember whether he deleted emails. Interesting. Now, what happened next? The House Select Subcommittee on the Coronavirus Pandemic found evidence that Morens sought guidance from the NIH's Freedom of Information Act office on how to avoid records requests. Now, what in the world? There goes the choo-choo train. So you're using, allegedly, Gmail instead of your secure government servers. You're asking how to avoid FOIA requests, Freedom of Information requests, and you can't remember if you've deleted information pertaining to possible negative side effects of COVID vaccines. Ask yourself a question. Why would you do that? Why? That's up for you to decide. You do your research and make your own decisions, folks. We're not going to have time to get to this story. We'll get to it next week. April 11, 2025. according to the American Academy of Ophthalmology, COVID-19 vaccination could be associated with increased risk of herpes keratitis. The study came out pretty clearly. We'll get to that next week. We don't have time. We've got to wrap it up. We may still need that paper. Okay, time to get down to the golden hour, folks. We head back to, that's right, you guessed it, Florida. Here's our headline. Florida man in only his underwear destroys merchandise kiosk at Walt Disney World. A Florida man in his underwear was arrested for allegedly destroying a sales kiosk at Walt Disney World. Sean Patrick McHugh, 24, of Port Orange, was arrested on multiple charges in the early morning hours of New Year's Day. McHugh pleaded not guilty, according to Orange Circuit Court records. I have reason to believe he was intoxicated and he endangered the safety of another person's safety, said the sheriff's deputy. They released the arrest report, which is why we're reporting on the situation. They only recently released the arrest report, which is why it's being reported on months later. McHugh was allegedly drunk and causing a scene when Disney security noticed he was trying to urinate into the bushes on the walkway between Epcot and Hollywood Studios. That's when he allegedly took off his clothes down to his undergarments and broke a $1,000 sales kiosk, according to the sheriff's office. He was immediately and verbally told to leave Disney property and not to return, but he refused. He was charged with third-degree felony criminal mischief and 2 misdemeanors for disorderly intoxication and trespassing. The charges are pending. He did not have a comment for the newspaper article. This isn't the first time someone has drunkenly taken off their clothes at Disney World. In 2022, in a story that got national attention, 2 New Jersey adult sisters were arrested at Disney Springs for fighting. Both females began punching, slapping, and pulling each other's hair. The arrest report said once they were separated, both sisters allegedly ran at each other, slipped in the younger sister's vomit, then fell into the bushes while still fighting. The security manager said that the younger sister ran a few feet away and took off her dress, exposing her breasts. Shortly after, they began to punch each other again. Oh. I don't know what it is, man, in Florida. They love to start taking their clothes off and fighting, man. Whew. The woman was wearing only her sandals and underwear by the time the sheriff's deputies arrived on the scene. Well, folks, I guess it wasn't the happiest place on earth after all. That's gonna do it. That's it, folks. Remember, don't wait until you have an emergency to prepare for it. If you wait, it may be too late. If you don't make it out alive, you don't make it out at all. Stay safe out there, folks.